Charisma does not exist in a vacuum. Charisma is situational. Charisma is something that is constructed by an audience. It was a moment in late 19th century Jewish history. Anti-Semitism, poverty, persecution, assimilation, everything was up in the air. Many Jews were looking for a charismatic leader. And along came Herzl.
I've had a fascination with Herzl since I was a child, which is obviously very unusual. My fascination is really about where the State of Israel came from. My grandparents moved from Toronto to Israel in 1955. We used to go there as kids in the 60s to spend the summer with our grandparents. At the same time, I've always collected things. I have a collection of collections. In 1991, my grandmother passed away. And in her home in Ramat Gan, there was a portrait of Herzl. That was the first item in my collection. I came to realize there was such a thing as Herzl memorabilia. And started to collect it, which resulted in ultimately having this collection, which is the world's largest collection of Herzl memorabilia.
Born in Budapest in 1860, Herzl was the quintessential European. He was raised in a bilingual home. He spoke Hungarian and German with equal fluency. His first letters to his parents were written at the age of 6. Dear father, dear mother, how are you? I am well. Love, your son, Theodor. Herzl is often described as being from an assimilated home. The word assimilation has connotations of escape from Jewishness, of living without knowledge or in ignorance of one's Jewishness. One thing we can be sure of, if a Jew is growing up in Budapest in the 1860s, 1870s, and beyond, the one thing they are never not aware of is their Jewishness. His father himself had been raised in an Orthodox home. Herzl attended what we would call today a Jewish day school. He loved very few people. He loved his sister, his older sister, Pauline, who died tragically. He never got over her death. So Herzl was a lonely man. When he was a teenager, he began writing for newspapers. He would go on to become the Paris correspondent of the Neue Freie Presse, the most prestigious newspaper in Central Europe. Paris, as Walter Benjamin said, was the capital of the 19th century. And Herzl was in his element. He knew everybody. He knew Clemenceau, he knew Proust. He had a gift for journalism. But Herzl never respected journalism. What he wanted was to be a great playwright, and Herzl wrote many plays. His plays were performed in Prague, New York, and Berlin, and even in Vienna, at the most prestigious theater in Vienna, the Burgtheater. But the plays were wooden, light, drawing room comedies. He didn't burn with the desire to express himself the way that great artists can. He simply wanted to be successful.
It's funny because I can't remember the first time I heard about Herzl. Growing up in a Jewish American household, a Zionist household, it was a name and a figure that was always there. I think he really has this interesting duality. And like any symbol, you can sort of project whatever you want on him. The hipster Herzl, Herzl on t-shirts, Herzl bobbleheads, etc.
People have been collecting Herzl memorabilia since the time of Herzl's life. And part of the reason for that is that the idea that Herzl had, which was expressed in the Judenstaat, Jewish state, was such a new idea. The thought that the Jewish people could have their own homeland, which was a real paradigm shift in the minds of Jewish people.
Anti-Semitism is the dark underside of European civilization. He had been exposed to it in Paris at the time of the scandal over corruption in the company that was building the Panama Canal, all the way through that first trial known as the Dreyfus Affair. Herzl was a man by 1895 in his mid-30s in a state of crisis. And then he entered into a period of frenzy in which he began to write furiously about dreams for how to solve the problem of the Jews. And some of that material became his pamphlet, The Jewish State, in 1896. And the answer for him is to create a Jewish homeland in which Jews will be safe, in which they'll be able to live as Jews as they wish, religious or secular, or however they define it, but there won't be anti-Semitism. And as he depicts in his novel, New Land, it will be an intensely and thoroughly European society.
You have to remember, you can't read history backwards. We know when we're reading Herzl that the Ottoman Empire is going to be over in 15, 20 years. He doesn't know that. The Ottoman Empire has been around for 400 years. So this idea that you could have a new configuration in the Middle East, and especially this push towards a state, is really radical.
He understood the ability to communicate ideas through theater, and the Zionist congresses were, in a sense, a kind of theater.
What needs to happen for a movement to be created, a role of mass culture, mass media in creating a nationalist identity. And he wants to be famous. He wants to be known.
So all of that has given rise to so many things to collect.
Herzl did not invent the Zionist movement. It existed before him, but it was very small and weak. And he created an institutional structure. He created a way of talking about Zionism. After all, the word Zionism didn't even exist until the early 1890s. And Herzl's the one who actually picked up the word and began to use it systematically. On the other hand, he never really deals with Palestinian Arab feelings or opposition to Zionism. Remember that Herzl went to Palestine only once in his life. And when he was there, he wrote about Arabs in a highly cursory way. He wrote about villages neglected, quote, in Arab fashion, end quote. There's very little engagement. There's certainly no engagement with Arabs in Palestine as a collective, as a group, with a will and desire of their own. A truly great charismatic leader, if we're going to look at Herzl in comparative perspective, has to not only have the charm and the work ethic and the ability to make people feel good about themselves, he also has to have the power to create really something out of nothing, whose charisma is actually perpetuated through imagery and through stories told about him. Just as he captured something in the moment, he has continued to exert charismatic authority beyond the grave.
In the second year of Israel's independence, the 22nd of Av, August 1949, the nation fulfills Herzl's last request, that he be buried in Israel. His remains are brought to Jerusalem for burial on Mount Herzl, high among the hills surrounding the city. I do not know the hour of my death, he wrote in 1898, but Zionism will not die.